drive to Philly, have a cheesesteak.
Spoken like a true Philadelphian.
Absolutely.
Jimmy, Darren, it's been a long time.
Yes, it's good to see you.
Yeah, in fact, I don't think we've had you on since we moved to our.
You
this
haven't.
is our downsize. You remember the old studio
Yeah,
over
sure,
on
I do.
Riverside? The rent got up to about $7,000 a month, and we found this place for $700 a month. And,
well, that's a nice savings.
Yeah, we had to save some. Yeah, it's a little more than that now, but hey, it's nice to see you.
It's
and
good to
it's
see
nice
you,
to go
too.
traveling.
Thank you. Yeah, that's a nice song.
It is.
I like the song.
Not many people have done that, and it's a great arrangement.
Oh, it's great. Lou Forestieri did it. It's a beautiful arrangement, and it's charming. You know, there's a lot of little subtleties in the chart that are, and you picked up immediately on them. It's amazing.
Because it's definitely a different arrangement from what Frank Sinatra did. I did not know until you told me moments ago that song was actually written for him for the
Come Fly With Me album.
And it's a Sammy Cahn song, and it's so funny. And we're going to play another new song from Jimmy here in a minute. But I had years and years ago, Tita Cahn, Sammy's widow, called and she said, "I want to take you to lunch." And she said, "There's something I have to ask you." So we meet in Beverly Hills and we have lunch. And she said, "You used to work in country radio." And I said, "Yes, ma'am." And she said, "Do you know Tim McGraw or Faith Hill?" And I said, "I know them both." And she said, "Do you know how to get in contact with them?" And I said, "Well, I can give you the contact information." And I finally, why? She said, "I want them to cut one of Sammy's songs." And I'm racing through in my head what Sammy Cahn song Tim McGraw or Faith Hill or both would record. And it turned out that it was this song. Jimmy Darren on MartiniInTheMorning.com. MartiniInTheMorning.com. Great Sammy. Was it Sammy Cahn?
Sammy Cahn, Jimmy Van Heusen.
Yeah.
Let It Snow, right?
And that's the song. And so the lunch with Tim McGraw.
Let It Snow is Sammy Cahn, Julie Stein.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's
Julie
right.
Stein.
When I kept thinking when I had that lunch with Tita Cahn, I kept thinking what song of Sammy's would work with country singers, and that's a song that Tim McGraw and Faith Hill wound up cutting, and she is I bring her up because I know you know Tita Cahn. We talked about her on the air since Steve Tyrell's Sammy Cahn homage. She is I think one of the greatest promoters of this music because she is just Sammy Cahn. She told me once that Frank Sinatra once said Sammy Cahn put more words in my Frank said Sammy Cahn put more words in my mouth than all the women I've been involved with, or something to that effect. And we were just talking about you a couple days ago. What was it? Something came up. I think we were playing a Nancy Sinatra song or something. I think it was on Tuesday. We do twin spins where we play two different versions of the same song. And, and Glenn Frey just cut from the Eagles. He just cut My Buddy, and Nancy has a great version of My Buddy, and we played them back to back. And we were talking about Nancy, and I was thinking about you. I was just thinking we hadn't seen Jimmy in ages. And then on Wednesday, James Tormé was here, and of course you and his dad were really good.
Oh yeah.
It's almost like there's been this lead up, and then all of a sudden here you are.
And then I emailed you
out of the blue.
Out of the blue.
That was weird.
That's weird, but that's always a sign of something. I mean, I'm kind of spiritual in that sense. And when something happens like that, I mean, with James Tormé and Nancy Sinatra and whatever, and all of a sudden, out of the blue, you hear from me, and we haven't talked for a while.
It's been a while, yeah.
Yeah,
that was weird, and I wanted to tell James, and I didn't do it. When Daisy was working with us, Daisy Tormé was working with us at the radio station. I remember you told a story about her dad after he passed away, and it made me think. Before I started to tell James that I was going to repeat that story to him, and I didn't, because I thought about when we used to do stuff with Daisy. We were out in public at public events. People would come up and say, "Oh, I met your dad," and and all these nice comments. Every once in a while, somebody would have. And Mel had an interesting life.
Oh yeah,
and every once in a while, somebody would want to come up and tell Daisy some kind of racy story, and she's like, "I don't want to hear this." And so, but the story that you told about Mel's funeral was, I think, one of the funniest, because if anyone who's met Daisy is so much like her dad in one particular way that she's very particular.
Particular, anal. You know, I mean, like, and so am I. And Mel, I mean, he was so meticulous about everything. He used to build these gorgeous model planes and ships and things like that. They were tiny, and they were so. It took so much patience. And there's another story I can tell you about Mel quickly. That my wife had gone down to her friend Michael Callan's wife's house down in the flats of Beverly Hills, and they had left the sliding door open, and my 3-year-old son Christian had walked out, and no one could find him.
Oh.
So it was panic time, and Mel and I lived close by, so I called Mel. He got in the car with me, and we searched the neighborhoods like crazy. Finally, the police found him, but I mean, that's how good a friend Mel was. He was always there for me if I ever needed him, and vice versa. I love him, absolutely love him.
So fast forward at his funeral.
Oh, well, I was one of the pallbearers, and next to me was Ray Anthony. So when we set the casket down on the gravesite, as we stepped back, I looked back at the casket, and I saw that it was askew of the gravesite, and I said, "Oh, Mel would go nuts." So I told Ray Anthony, I said, "Listen, I'm going up there. I'm going to move the casket. I'm going to straighten it out." And he said, "You can't do that." I said, "Well, I'm doing it. If you want to go with me, great, because it's going to be tough for me to do it alone, but I'm doing it." So I went up, and Ray came along with me. We straightened it out, and I turned to the people, and I said, I had to do that. I said, I could never leave it askew of the gravesite because it would really drive Mel insane. And everybody laughed, and it was a nice moment, you know.
Jimmy Darren on MartiniInTheMorning.com. Going to hear a bunch of Jimmy Darren music. If you got something you want to hear, use the request link. Let us know who you are, where you're listening. It's Martini in the Morning, and we do it
because of you.
MartiniInTheMorning.com, Jimmy Darren, because of you. That's why we do this, playing the greatest songs ever written online around the clock and around the world. And I'm just thrilled that you've been back in the studio and you've got some new stuff.
Yeah.
Do you have more coming?
Oh, definitely, yeah.
You gonna do a whole album?
Yeah, I'm going to do an entire album.
And
Yes.
and you're
I just was so anxious to get these two because I hadn't cut in such a long time.
yeah. How long has it been?
Like probably 9 years.
Wow.
Since I've recorded, and Lou Forestieri and I got together. He's a wonderful arranger and composer, and we just had some. I think you're going to like the new stuff. It's kind of in the bossa, samba.
Really?
Yeah,
It's
but not out of
character for what you do.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
It's funny we were just talking about that because they're sadly, and I know some artists. I don't want to say like they feel like they're in a rut, but when you develop a fan base, they have certain expectations, and you can broaden and you can do other things. But if you go too far, like it would be like having and by the way, not who you were talking about earlier, but somebody we both know had talked about doing like a country oldies album, and I said, no,
forget it.
Bad idea. In fact, a dear friend who might be listening right now, I hope she's not, but did a country album, and she's a very her fan base is they're very fond of her jazz work, and the country album didn't do well, and it's like so you're going to do some bossa, but Jimmy Darren bossa.
Absolutely, I'm not going to go to the extreme, and I have some great people from Cuba actually who are going to be working on the session, guitarists, etc. But I don't want to go to the extreme where it's so Cuban,
where it doesn't sound like you,
where it's not my kind of music.
Yeah.
I mean, I told that to Lou Forestieri. I said, we're not going to go away from where I am. You know,
are they bringing cigars?
We're going to keep it moderate. You know, we're going to keep it so it's mine and not me trying to be Cuban or whatever.
Are you going to go out on tour and promote the album?
I'm always out. I swear to you. I just came back from Toronto, New York, Arizona, and I go to San Francisco and then Vegas in January and again in June.
Wow.
I play the South Point. I don't know if
in Vegas.
Does Steve play the South Point?
No.
I know Jack Jones does.
Yeah.
Jack plays there.
I know some other people who have, but
I love that room.
Yeah, in fact,
nice
I hear from every time you play up there. We hear from friends, from listeners that are around the Vegas area that go to see you. I refer to you occasionally on the air as Jimmy Darren, and people say that's James Darren. Do you ever get that?
It's so funny. When I first started in the business, I started as an actor with Columbia Pictures, so I was billed as James Darren. Then I did. I started recording, and they thought that was kind of formal, so they put Jimmy Darren on the label. And people would actually ask me, "Are you related to Jimmy Darren?" I said, "No, I am Jimmy Darren. I'm James Darren, but I'm Jimmy."
What's your SAG name?
James.
Yeah.
James Darren.
So technically, somebody could come along and join SAG and be Jimmy Darren.
Probably.
We were talking about
Michael Douglas. I'm trying to think of the actor's name now. The actor who did the Batman, one of the first Batmans. He's a wonderful. He's a comic, actually.
Michael Keaton.
Michael. His name is Michael Douglas.
No.
Oh yeah.
So he can't be Michael Douglas.
He can't be Michael Douglas.
We had a fellow in last week, very very good singer. I'd never heard him before, but we'd met a couple of times, and I kept hearing from people around Southern California that had seen him perform, and he came in, and his name is Bill A. Jones, because there's so many Bill Jones and William Jones and different variations of it. He has to go by. He's an actor. He's on. He has a recurring role on Glee. He plays the part of Rod Remington. I think he's a news anchor on Glee.
I know who he is.
And anyway, he came in. We played some of his music, and he. It's Bill. It's because of SAG, the Screen Actors Guild. There can only be one.
Yes, of course. And how about Darren James?
Darren James?
Yeah, there are several people named Darren James.
Really?
Spelt exactly like my last name.
That's the other thing, the whole spelling thing, because yours Darren,
right,
and the other fellow is Darin.
Bobby was Darin.
Yeah.
And Bobby's real name was, of course, Walden Robert Casato, and mine James William Ercolani. But there is a Darren. There is a Darren James, and I became aware of it. My grandson was up in the suite one day. I was working at the South Point in Vegas, and he said, "Oh, look at that, Pop-Up." He said, "They have you under Darren James." I said, "Well, that's bizarre, but that's how they register your
last
hotel."
name.
Yeah. So, and then my son Anthony said, "Well, there is a Darren James. He's in the entertainment business."
That's funny.
But you're different. I mean, number one, he's black. Number two, he's an adult film star.
Wow. It's martiniinthemorning.com. Jimmy Darren in the studio. I'm just thrilled that you got some new stuff out. You're out playing. And we should be, while you're here, I want to find out where you're going to be, because people always ask, where can I see Jimmy Darren perform? Because occasionally you play out here in Thousand Oaks at the...
the Performing Arts Center.
Yeah, because I've got a number of friends who went to see you out there the last time you were there.
That's a nice place, actually.
Jimmy Darren on martiniinthemorning.com. We always get nice compliments when we play your songs. There's certain of your songs that you've done a lot of standards, but you've done some other songs that aren't as well known, and maybe some songs, whether they were big for you at the time, songs that really fit into what this music feels like today. And this is one of those songs. I love this song. It's Jimmy Darren, You Better Love Me. Because I got an expiration date, so hurry up. It's martiniinthemorning.com. martiniinthemorning.com. You better love me while you may. Jimmy Darren on martiniinthemorning.org for those who want us to be proper. James Darren. It's martiniinthemorning.com. We just got a text from our friend Brett Bailey in Thousand Oaks, Brett's in Newport Beach. Brett said, "Hey, it's great to hear Jimmy again. Tell him I'll buy him another glass of wine next year at the Star Trek convention."
Okay.
He was at the Star Trek convention.
And he bought me a glass of wine?
And you guys were, I guess, having dinner in the same restaurant, and he didn't want to bother.
Oh, yeah.
So he sent the waiter over and bought you a glass of wine.
It's interesting. I mean, the people are so sweet and considerate, and I never mind people coming over to me and talking. I mean, I think it's such a nice compliment, and I remember that. And I get a little... I can't say upset, but I want them to come over. You know, and I thanked them for the glass of wine.
Yeah, he said you came over to the table.
Then I went over to their table because they always feel like they're intruding, and they're not. You know.
You know, that's such a. Is this my water or yours?
That's yours.
It's such a fine line. It's like I'll see somebody and I like Miriam's the opposite. We do our live broadcast at Vitello's and. Who was in the Richard Roundtree played Shaft was sitting across from where we do a live 2-hour broadcast every Wednesday from Vitello's, and Richard was sitting across and Miriam texts me. She's a table away. She texts me and she said, "Do you know who that is sitting across from you?" And she told me who it was, and I don't want to bother. I don't want to intrude because you're a star, but at the same time, you deserve to be able to go out and have lunch and not be. At least that's the way I look at it. So I didn't say anything. Then he struck up a conversation talking about. He heard we were playing a Patty Austin song, and he and Patty are friends, and we just started talking about music, and I guess it's different that way. But the one time that I did this, and you even know the location because it's not too far from where you live. Al, the engineer, and I were having lunch a couple of years ago at the Daily Grill down at Laurel and Ventura.
Sure.
And Queen Latifah was sitting out on the eating outside, but she kept coming in to check the score. There was a Yankees game on, and she's a big Yankees fan. Anyway, she kept coming inside, and I finally broke down, and I said, I don't do this, but I got to tell you something. I love your music. And she said, "You're a hip hop fan?" And I said, no, your jazz stuff. And I mentioned
she's great.
Traveling Light, one of the albums, the other one is the Dana Owens album. And she looked at me, she said, Nobody bought those albums. No, how do you know those? And I told her about the radio station.
Sure.
We play them, but there's a fine line there, and I understand. Like when you're at the Star Trek convention, as an example, people would probably want to give you your space and all that, but it's nice that you're gracious about it.
Well, I experienced something one time, and I won't tell you the actor's name. We were having dinner at separate tables that we weren't together, and he was with another very famous actor, and someone came over to him and asked for his autograph. And he said, "Can you not see that I'm eating? Do not bother me."
Ooh.
And I couldn't imagine anybody doing that. I just couldn't. I could never do that to anyone. My mouth could be full of food. You know what I mean? And I would just swallow it and talk to the person. Hey, it's a nice compliment. I remember I was at the Beverly, the shopping center in Beverly Boulevard, and Anita Baker's coming up on an escalator, and I'm going down, and I looked at her, and I love Anita Baker.
Yeah, she's
and
wonderful.
I said, "Is that you?" She said, "Is that you?" I said, "It's me." "Is that you?" "Yes, you. It's me." And then we both turned around, came, and met, and I'd never met her before. I just had to tell her that she destroys me. She's a killer.
What an amazing voice, and
and what a performer.
She is one of the pop. She's known for her pop stuff. She's one of the artists that if I could ever get her alone in a room, I would say, "I'm going to give you 10 Great American Songbook type songs. I'd love to see you record," because she, with that voice, I mean, she did one of the duets with Frank Sinatra. She did. No, she didn't. Did she?
Not that I know.
No, I don't think she did. I was thinking Patti LaBelle.
Yeah.
But Anita Baker is a fabulous.
She's
but
incredible.
it is funny around here because that must happen a lot. You run into people, people that are in the business.
If I'm in a restaurant and I see another performer and I don't really know them, where I could go over to the table, I usually send a note. I'll write a little note, give it to the waiter, and just tell them, and the other person will either give a wave or come over or ask me to come over to their table.
Hey, we got another song of yours. You asked me when we were talking on the phone the other night. You asked, let's see, it's a song that we didn't have of yours.
Right.
Hang on, let me find it. What did I do with it? I lost it already. It's in the computer. I know. Tell me about it.
Let me tell you about it.
Yeah, tell me about it.
It's from Bye Bye Birdie, and it was produced by Stu Phillips, who's great. The best album I ever did was produced by Stu, and it's a lovely ballad, and I think your listeners will like it.
"Baby Talk to Me," James Darren. Such a serious song. I thought we should. No, Jimmy Darren on MartiniInTheMorning.com. MartiniInTheMorning.com. You're right. Great song. Baby, you talking? No,
Yeah.
you've done this before. I remember at our old studio, one day I was sitting in the studio, and we had talked not long before that, and talking to Jimmy Darren on MartiniInTheMorning.com. So I'm sitting there doing the 2 Martini lunch, and I had just promoted that I had a couple songs coming up from Jimmy Darren. It was one of those, like the other day when we were just talking about you with James Tormé, and then there you are with an email.
Right.
So I'm sitting there doing the 2 Martini lunch. I got a couple of Jimmy Darren songs scheduled. Jimmy walks into the studio and he said, "Hey, I don't think you have this." And it was, I got to play it. It's one of my. It's a song we play. Here.
I got to tell you a story later about Ella Fitzgerald, which is kind of interesting.
Yeah.
Considering she was the greatest of all.
Right.
I mean,
First
second
lady
to none.
of song, as they say.
The most gorgeous human being as well. You want me to tell you it now?
Yeah.
She was performing at Caesar's Palace in Las Vegas, and I went backstage. She was just about to go on, just to say hi, give her a hug and kiss, and I'm hugging her, and she's saying to me, "Oh, Jimmy, I'm so scared." I said, "Why?" She said, "Oh, I'm so scared they're not going to like me."
Are you kidding
I
me?
said, "Who?" She said, "This is a true story." I said, "Who?" She said, "The audience." I said, "No, you're right. They're not going to like you. They're going to love you." And this woman, who was the greatest of all, was actually shaking. I swear to you. I give her a kiss. They play her on. She walks on stage, opens her mouth, 2-3 notes come out. The audience goes crazy.
Yeah.
Of course, then she's home. But that little, I mean, for someone with that talent, it's amazing. I mean, I know a lot of people like that, including Sinatra. He'd be real uptight before he went on, maybe not show it a lot, because, you worry about, is my voice going to be there tonight?
Well, it's it's the same with people who do what I do. Everybody thinks that because you talk on the radio that you're this outgoing, gregarious, and Mother Miriam teases me because almost every time somebody takes a picture of me and I've probably done, I'll bet you in my 40 years plus doing this, I'll bet you I've done 2,000 artist intros on stage, and I have terrible stage fright, and Miriam teases me because to this day she'll know whether I'm comfortable or nervous, because if I'm nervous, my hands will be in my pockets, and she'll give me a bad time about it. But it's easy to sit in a little room and talk to yourself, even though we got nowadays, we got cameras in the studio and all that. It's so easy to sit in a little room and talk to yourself, even if you got 1 million people listening. But you go on stage, and this is what I just admire so much about what you guys do. You go on stage. I mean, to have the ability to go on stage and see those people looking at you, that absolutely weirds me out.
Well, I feel the same way as you. If I had to go up and make a speech about something, like my friend Justice Armand Arabian has these lunches every year for his charities, and he wants me to get up there and say something, and I get so tongue-tied and so nervous. And Chief Bratton was there one year, and Armand introduced me as Jimmy Darren. And as I walked off the stage, the chief said to me, "I thought it was James."
The being on stage and having people I'll say something stupid on the radio, and I know, if I say something that I think is funny and I know it's falling flat, I know it, but not like it on stage. When you're on stage and those people are looking at you and you say something you think is funny and they don't laugh, that's a really awful feeling.
Well, imagine a comic. I mean, a singer hides behind the music for the most part. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
We have great songs.
Right.
But a comic, I mean, I've done, because I do some funny stuff in my show, and sometimes it doesn't work. And I really have this simpatico for the comic. I think to myself, my God, this guy's doing it every day, and every joke. I mean, if 4 or 5 jokes fall flat, what do you do?
You've done everything in show business, haven't you?
Well,
much.
Just about.
I mean, you
TV,
sing,
motion
you act,
pictures,
right?
Direct.
Yeah, you spent some time behind the camera. Didn't you do some stuff with Aaron Spelling?
Yeah, I did Melrose Place, Beverly Hills 90210, T.J. Hooker, which I was in, and a lot of shows for Aaron. Absolutely, and that's a tough job. I mean, directing. I've read stories by other actors who said, who directed and said, "I'll never do it again."
Really?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's a tough job. It really is, especially for me because I'm so bloody. Yeah, I'm so particular and so anal about everything. I used to get to the studio 4:30 in the morning before the painters.
Really?
Yeah, literally, and go through every shot.
Jimmy Darren on MartiniInTheMorning.com. Of all the things that you've done in your career, what stands out as the thing that you're most proud of?
I mean, individually, or the thing I enjoy most is singing, because it's so easy for me. It's natural. Acting I love too, but it takes work. You know, you got to really. Directing I like, but I don't think I would ever direct again.
Really?
Maybe a film. You know, a low budget film or something, but I would never do TV. You're really under the gun, man. You gotta bring it in within 7 days, on budget or under budget. Otherwise, because you're a guest. Remember, I'm not part of that family. I just come in, 1 week or 2 weeks a year, 3 weeks a year, whatever it may be. But singing is my, and the thing I like. For singing, the album I mentioned to you earlier, Love Among the Young by Stu Phillips, produced and arranged, for me was my best accomplishment, my best job ever as a vocalist, for sure.
Do you still do some of the songs from that album in your shows?
Yeah, sure I do.
Which ones really stand out?
Hello Young Lovers, which I really like, and Love Among the Young, which is the title of the album. So I do a few of them.
Jimmy Darren on MartiniInTheMorning.com. MartiniInTheMorning.com. That's the song we'd been talking a few days earlier here on MartiniInTheMorning.com, and I'm doing the two martini lunch, and Jimmy walks in here. we didn't have. So that's from Love Among the Young.
Yeah, that's from that album that Stu did.
You had some great musicians on that.
Oh yeah. Doc Severinsen being one. I mean, so I was talking to someone, and they told me he lives like in, I don't know, Montana or something like that. He's just like chilled out and
really
very happy.
I wonder how those sparkly jackets go over in Montana.
I don't think they work.
We should ask.
I think it scares the bears away.
We had Amara listening in Kalispell, Montana this morning. We should ask her, if she sees anybody walking around with, with a sparkly jacket on.
I was in Great Falls, Montana. I did a film there called All the Young Men with Sidney Poitier and Alan Ladd. And we could sit on the porch of the little kind of restaurant thing, and we could see bears and their cubs walking up on the hillside.
No kidding.
Yeah, man. And we used to walk at night. It was Mort Saul and Ingemar Johansson and Sydney, and we'd take walks at night. And I said, I'm not going to walk. I mean, it's pitch black. There was no street lights. We're in the woods. I said, so I had to carry a rifle, which I did.
Wow.
I didn't.
You were prepared.
I had to be, man. I figured, what are you going to do if you see a bear? What are you going to do is, hey, look, we're actors. Don't bug us.
It's Martini in the Morning. Jimmy Darren, 10 o'clock on the west coast of the United States. Hey, don't forget, by the way, we want to play your Sinatra at 6 this evening at 6 p.m. Pacific. The link's on the front page of our website. Click on that. You give us 3 Sinatra songs you'd like to hear on Sinatra at 6. And I said this earlier, and I mean it, and I've told Jimmy this before. I've done every kind of music on the radio. I mean, everything from R&B to classical to rock and country for years. I came to this music because when they asked me to try to create a little more contemporary version of this format, and so I had to learn it. I mean, I was a fan. It's like I told Nancy Sinatra one day. She was in the studio years ago, and she said, you're a little young to be a big fan of my dad's music and this music in general. And I said, no. I said, and I still remember the moment. I was 12, I think.
Wow.
I was 12 years old, and as I did every night, I had gone to bed with my transistor radio under my pillow, and I woke up in the morning, and I heard a Beatles song, and 2 songs later, it was a Rolling Stones song, and they were huge at the time. But in between the Beatles song and the Rolling Stones song was Frank Sinatra's "That's Life," and as far as I was concerned, because we didn't make those distinctions back then. It was
Sure.
what was cool, and as far as I was concerned, Frank Sinatra was every bit the rock star that the Beatles and the Rolling Stones were.
Sure.
And that's how that. So I've always been a fan of the music. And then when I turned 40, a friend gave me the Frank Sinatra duets 1 and 2, which sort of brought me back to it. But again, I'm a fan. I'm not an expert on this music. So this thing we do, Sinatra at 6, we do it at 6 a.m., 6 p.m. Pacific every day. Listeners submit their 3 favorite Sinatra songs, and then on Fridays we pick one of them. I've learned so much from our listeners about Frank Sinatra music, because they'll pick some of the big songs, I've Got You Under My Skin, or whatever.
Right.
But they'll throw something in like there's an album, Frank Sinatra album called Watertown, that I wasn't familiar with. And in fact, over on the wall over here, one of the albums my wife picked out when we were decorating the old studio, she was looking for album covers that were portraits as opposed to photographs. Like we got Peggy Lee down here, Dream Street, and then Keely Smith's Politely, again, as a portrait, and then Frank Sinatra. The only one she could find, and I know there were others, but the one she found at the time was the album Where Are You? I didn't know the song "Where Are You." I didn't know much about the album. We've learned all that from our listeners requesting their favorite Sinatra songs.
There's an album of Frank's that Lou Forestieri told me about, and I cannot find it. It was done in the UK, and live, of course, and just incredible, the cuts he played for me, but I cannot find it on Amazon, and I can't remember the name of it. I will call you and tell you, but it's kind of interesting. I mean, he did so many. There are so many songs that make sense in this genre, and he did so many of them, and it's just been a great experience with the people who listen to this music. Some who've been listening to this music their entire life. Some are like me, and they came to it later. But it's interesting. It's been great. It's been a great education finding other people's tastes on this music. Well, the thing about Sinatra, I think, because there are so many young kids, 12, 13, 14 years old, 15 years old, whatever, who hear him, and he's just the architect, the master of that music. And so when there's so much magic when you hear him, man, you just absolutely fall in love with whatever he's doing. I still do to this day. I called Nancy one day. I said, I heard this cut of your dad. It was from a concert he did in 1957, and just one of those things. A great arrangement by Nelson Riddle. I said, I got to, and she said, Jimmy, it's out of print, blah, 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 but it's a gold album. Then I remembered I had 3 gold albums put away somewhere that I had never opened to Frank's. And when I say gold, it's gold in color,
Really?
And and I had the album.
Really?
I had it. And it was just incredible.
Is it that one with the beginning? It's live, and there was a vibe thing at the beginning. Is it that version?
No. This is such a great. It's a Nelson Riddle chart, done 1957.
When you say live, do you mean live in the studio or live in concert?
No, live in concert. Yeah, concert live.
I wonder if we have it.
It's so beautiful. Oh, the arrangement's incredible.
For people who haven't heard you on the air before, who don't know a lot of your background, we should maybe, since we're talking about Frank Sinatra, you and Frank Sinatra were very close.
Well, I've always been close to the family. Nancy Sr. I absolutely adore. She's such a beautiful woman. And Tina and Frank Jr., who I absolutely love. And, of course, he's, to me, the closest thing, because genetically he is, to that kind of singing,
right,
to his dad. We all are influenced by him, but Frank Jr. is Frank.
There are times that I've seen Frank Jr., if you close your eye. In fact, we took Steve Tyrell to see Frank Jr. at the Canyon Club in Agora Hills years ago, and there was one song that I always feel funny calling him Frankie, but I know that's what all the family calls him. But there was one time he was, and I want to say it was maybe Night and Day, and Steve turned around and looked at me, and he closed his eyes, and I knew exactly what he's doing. Frank was so on that night.
Yeah.
It was scary. And another time we saw him, he opened for Tony Bennett at the Cerritos Center. It was their 10th anniversary, and they asked Frank Jr. to come and do a thing about his father because Frank Sinatra opened the Cerritos Center 10 years before that. So that night, Frank Jr. was really, really, really on. And there were women sitting in front of me that were weeping because it took them back to seeing his father perform. It was amazing. You know?
And the interesting thing is, I'm influenced by Frank Sinatra. Many singers are influenced by Frank Sinatra. But Frank Sinatra Jr. is Frank Sinatra.
Yes.
I mean, it's his son. You know, so genetically, it's the same voice, or as close as you can possibly get to it.
I think the biggest difference between the two of them, I've said this before, I don't know if I've ever said it to Frank Jr., but it's interesting what made, I think, and you know a lot more about this than I do, but I think what set them apart, Frank Jr. has a great voice. I mean, he has a really great voice, but his father did things to his voice through his life. He smoked. Oh yeah. He drank. But those are the things I think that set him apart, because you can hear not only the mechanical things that smoking and drinking, but you can also hear the scars, the life that he lived.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, if you listen to him when he first started, you know, you hear this sweet little voice, then it gets, in the 50s or whatever, it gets to this, like, incredible sound, and then you get to this more maturity and more, more experiences or whatever, more life. And then towards the end, I mean, he could just tear you. But he always tore me apart. But when he was really towards the end of his singing, it was devastatingly
haunting.
Incredible. Yeah.
One of the things that's funny you mentioned, I was headed somewhere else, but you just reminded me of a conversation with the day that they released, they re-released some Frank Sinatra Christmas songs, and. They had gone. We did a live thing on the radio station. We had Terry Woodson, who's a band leader and arranger. We had Terry. We had Al Viola, who actually passed not long after that. Frank Jr. was there, and somebody else from the connected to the family. Anyway, we were talking about one song in particular that Frank Sinatra recorded very late in life, and I remember talking to a couple of people close to the family, and they were surprised at the reaction that the song was getting. It was very, very late in Frank Sinatra's. Do you know the vocal I'm talking about?
Is it the Christmas song?
Yeah, Silent Night.
Silent Night. Yes, I do.
And they went back into the studio, redid it.
Yeah.
But
I think it was recorded originally just he and piano.
Originally, him and Bill Miller did it.
Yep.
And then they changed the Terry, I think, did a new chart on it, and they brought back a lot of Frank's old players. And this is back in 2003 or 2004. They redid it. But it's interesting what you were just talking about, the fact that late in life, even when he wasn't in his best voice, there's just something. Emotional.
Oh yeah. I mean, something. You know what it was? It was his life in a song. His life, what he had lived, what he had gone through, and his pain and suffering, his happiness. It's amazing. But I could tell you something. No matter what condition his voice was in, and even towards the very, very end of his life, his pitch was always impeccable. Always. I mean, incredible. It's amazing.
I'm going to break one of the fundamental rules of doing an interview with a great singer like Jimmy Darren. The song that we were just talking about. It's funny, we just started our holiday music poll, just started today, and we'll count down the 100 most requested Christmas songs over Thanksgiving weekend. This is the song we were talking about. This is where they went back in the studio and redid it. Frank Sinatra on martiniinthemorning.com. martiniinthemorning.com. Radio disc jockey rule 205C is when you have a singer in the studio, you don't play somebody else's music. But
oh man, I tell you, I play Sinatra every day. When you hear his interpretation of the song, and granted, he's not in the best voice, but my goodness, the the soul in that song is just incredible. I mean, it tears you apart.
Yeah.
You know, it could be a beautiful, bright, sunny day. I put that song on, I'm going to cry.
And that's when I had a little aside, and I hope I can come back to my original point. We're talking to some people about doing a TV show, and part of the TV show, the TV show would basically be our show on camera, just like we have our Martini Vision, but on a TV network. And they said, well, so while you're playing the songs on the radio, you know, like for instance, if you're doing an interview with somebody, you know, what's going to be on TV? We said so many times that when we have an artist in, that the conversation while the song's playing, like you and I were just sitting here talking about Frank Sinatra, those conversations I think would be as interesting to the TV viewer,
of course,
as the rest of it. And what we were talking about just then was that we did the world premiere of that song on the radio here in Los Angeles, and that version of it, and Al Viola, who has since passed, Al was played. He played on that session, like many of Frank's. They brought together basically his guys, and they listened to the vocal on headphones while Terry Woodson conducted the orchestra, and Terry said, and as they were playing the song, there were tears streaming down Al Viola's face, and Terry said that happened in the session, that a lot of these guys who were all very close to Frank Sinatra, a lot of them were in tears as they listened to that vocal, that emotional, gut-wrenching vocal. I mean, here's a guy who was like really, really, really successful, yet, as you were pointing out, he had people weren't always nice to him.
They were not nice to him. I mean, the press was horrible to Frank most of his career. I mean, the people who really knew anything about music, of course, loved Frank Sinatra, but they all look at his personal life like they do with most performers, and they crucify you. They make you what can I say? Make it uncomfortable. But Frank was never a big fan of that kind of press anyway, because it was. I don't mean because it was anti-Sinatra.
Right.
It's just that they were cruel. They were just not nice people.
When you came by that one day, because we'd been talking about some of your songs that we had and some that we didn't have, you brought me, there were several, I think you burned a CD and you brought me several. So one of the songs you brought me was your version of a song that a lot of different people have done. I love Nat King Cole's version of it. We have a young guy that nobody knows, sadly, from Nashville, Tennessee, a kid named Matt Belsanti, who actually named his debut album for this song. And and our listener, we get requests for it all the time. Our listeners fell in love with you singing "Blame It on My Youth." Jimmy Darren on Martini in the Morning. MartiniInTheMorning.com. James Darren, "Blame It on My Youth." When it was, where does that? How far?
Oh, that's also Doc. Doc Severinsen on that.
Is it really?
On that cut? Yeah. That was done at the Columbia Church in New York City, which was a church, and they used it as a recording studio because it for some reason no longer became a church, or was a church, and it was a great sound. It was all, as we talked off the air, it was all live, no overdubs, nothing. To me, the best session I'd ever done.
I just got a text message from folks who listen to Martini in the Morning, know, because we play his music and talk about him a lot. Dave Damiani, his No Vacancy Orchestra, is they are the band for our Martinis Across America tour presented by City. In fact, we have a tune-up show, kind of a test concept show coming up and you're going to love it. It's at the Covina Center for the Performing Arts. It's Dave and the band and young Aaron Boehm. John Prue will be there singing and playing the piano, a fabulous young piano player, jazz pianist and songwriter. And then an artist that some people will remember because she was sort of a child star, and she used to tour. She was the opening act for Rowan and Martin when they were out on the road doing their comedy bit. Her name is Carrie McDowell, and she has a fabulous album out called Talk About the Girl, and she's going to do a couple songs also. But anyway, Dave just texted me and he said, hey, we got to get James Darren on some of our shows in Philly, and we've got some shows coming up in New Jersey, and looking at one really big one that you would fit in very well in Chicago coming up next summer. Are you game for doing a few shows?
Absolutely. I'm ready.
I noticed in your version of it's nice to go traveling. I noticed that you customize lyrics a little bit.
Well, I changed the back end. The original lyric is light the home fire, get my slippers, make a pizza, and I changed it to call my buddies because I'm back in New York City. I'm not traveling. I'm away from Europe. Call my buddies, drive to Philly, get a cheesesteak.
Perfect. MartiniInTheMorning.com. James, Darren, I know that you play Vegas pretty regularly.
Yeah, the Rampart in Vegas. I'll be there in January. And then June 7th and 8th and 9th, I believe it is, at the South Point, which is a great hotel. It's fabulous. I love it.
You got to go see Jimmy Darren. And seriously, we'd love to get you out on some of the Martinis Across America shows.
I would love to do that.
A lot of fun to work with you.
I would love to do it. It would be my pleasure. I'd love to spend time with you, number one, and number two, I'd love to get up there and perform.
And I got to tell you that you made me feel good about this TV thing that we're working on. I hope it comes to fruition because it is something we've always wanted to do. But just our conversation, although some of our conversations that we've had off the air, when you talked about some of your some friends from the old neighborhood,
right? Yeah.
I remember one of your old friends ended up in a trash bag in a dumpster behind the food fair, which was a market. Probably something something you don't want to go through.
Oh my! I don't know. I was shocked when they told me the guy knocked the detective. I was working Palumbo's club in Philadelphia, and Tony Pace, his name is, but he called himself Pace, Pace, but it was actually Pace. And I opened the door and he said, "I have some bad news." I said, "What?" He said, "They found so and so in a trash bag behind the food fair." Oh my Lord! I said, "Oh well."
So some of these things we see in the movies and on television, actually,
I tell you, and I'm so incredibly fortunate, happy, and lucky to have lived what you see in The Godfather, or you see in. I mean, that's the neighborhood I lived in Philly, and I mean, Angelo Bruno was a good friend. I mean, he was the head of the Philadelphia mob, and a wonderful man. I mean, I absolutely loved Angelo. I used to go to his house and talk, and couldn't talk too much. We'd have to write a lot of stuff down just in case it was bugged, But and I mean that seriously. You have to say, "How was?" You write it down. How was so and so? Because he'd do this to me. He'd put up his finger like, "Shh, don't mention names." But a lot of those guys. I mean, there's a book called The Plumber. If you can get it, I think you can, on at least used anyway. And that's my neighborhood in Philly.
Wow. Jimmy Darren on MartiniInTheMorning.com. New album coming out when?
Probably in about 2 months.
About 2 months. Mm-hmm. And if you'll forgive us for doing this, because we only have 2 songs from the new album, we're going to play one of them again. And I like this, and I love the way you customize the lyrics.
Thank you.
Made it fit into the old neighborhood. Jimmy Darren on MartiniInTheMorning.com. Thank you.